The Jesus who healed everyone told this mother no, not once, 3 times in a row, and the third was so harsh that 2,000 years of readers have been left frozen in front of those words. But this woman didn't leave. She didn't weep in silence. She didn't convince herself that she deserved nothing. To every no, she had an answer. And on the third, she said something so brilliant that it stopped the very Son of God in his tracks. And with that single sentence, she opened the door of salvation to the whole world, standing outside, you included. Stay, because what you're about to understand is going to change forever. What you believe on those days when you pray, and heaven stays silent. Before we begin, one quick thing. If you're already part of this channel's family, leave me a like down below. That helps this grow and reach more homes that need it. And if you just got here today, relax. You don't have to give me anything yet. Stay until the end. And if this truly touches you, then you can leave it there. With that done, let's go back to that mother and to the first time heaven told her no. There's an experience that almost everyone who prays knows, and that almost no one talks about out loud. It's the experience of silence. You ask for something with everything you have, not out of a whim, not out of greed, but because someone you love is suffering, or because something is falling apart and you don't know how to hold it together. And you pray again, and up above, nothing happens. No voice, no sign, no door that opens. Just the ceiling of your room and the sound of your own breathing. And then comes the most poisonous thought of all. The thought that maybe the silence is an answer. That maybe you're not one of the people who receive. That maybe there's a list and your name isn't on it. If you've ever stood in that place, this story is for you. Because it's about exactly that. About a mother who asked God for the only thing in the world that mattered to her and received first the most complete silence in the entire New Testament. And about what she did with it. To understand what happened, you have to understand where it happened. And that's the first detail most people overlook. Jesus came worn out. The ministry had been relentless, one crowd after another, one argument after another. And then he did something that, for a Jewish teacher in the first century, was almost unthinkable. He left Israel. He crossed to the northwest, toward the coast, toward the region of 2 cities called Tyre and Sidon. Matthew tells it in chapter 15, and Mark confirms it in chapter 7. Mark adds something Matthew doesn't say, and it changes everything. He says Jesus entered a house and didn't want anyone to know he was there. Read it again. The Son of God, looking for a wall, a door, a corner where no one would find him. He wasn't going to heal. He wasn't going to preach. He was going to disappear for a moment. Now look at the place he goes to disappear in. Tyre and Sidon were not a neutral destination. In the Hebrew scriptures, they were the most loaded place that existed. They were Phoenician land, pagan land, land of the worshippers of Baal. And for those who knew their history, that word Canaanite carried an almost unbearable weight. The Hebrew word is Canaan, Canaan. And in all of Israel's memory, the Canaanites were the enemy. They were the people of idols, the people of sacrifices, the people Israel was supposed to have driven out of the promised land. From that very coast, centuries earlier, had come a princess who nearly destroyed the faith of Israel from the throne. Her name was Jezebel. From there came the cult that confronted the prophet Elijah on Mount Carmel. The prophets of Israel had pronounced the harshest oracles against those 2 cities. Isaiah and Ezekiel spoke of the pride of Tyre, of its wealth, of its commerce that filled the sea with ships, and of the judgment that would fall upon it. In the memory of a devout Jew, Tyre and Sidon were not simply a place on the map. They were a symbol. The symbol of everything that had risen up against the true God, the opulence, the idols, the foreign gods that demanded the blood of children. That's why, for a first-century rabbi, To set foot in that land of his own free will was not merely strange. It was almost a walking contradiction. It was walking with your own body toward the territory your entire people had learned to see as the exact opposite of the sacred. And remember what Jesus had just come from doing. He had come from teaching about the clean and the unclean, from telling the Pharisees that it is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person. And the moment he finishes tearing down that boundary with his words, he gets up and walks straight toward the most unclean place in all of known geography. That's the picture. And it isn't a slip in the story, it's the point. And it's exactly there, on that ground, right after arguing with the Pharisees about who is clean and who is unclean, that Jesus decides to enter. It's no accident, it's deliberate. The one who just tore down the borders of clean and unclean walks with his own body toward the wrong side of the border, and someone was waiting for him. Mark says it with a sentence that looks like a travel detail and isn't. He says Jesus could not remain hidden. The news of that teacher from Galilee who healed the sick and cast out demons had already crossed the borders. It was already passing from mouth to mouth, even in pagan land, even among people who had no temple, no covenant, no rite of any kind. One of those people was a mother, and that mother had a daughter. Imagine. And again I say imagine, because the text only tells us the girl was tormented by a demon, and the rest we reconstruct carefully. Imagine the nights in that house. A girl who screams and won't be calmed, who hurts herself, who suddenly doesn't recognize her own mother, who goes from stillness to fury without any warning. Imagine that woman awake night after night, trying everything, the remedies of the coast, the prayers to her own gods, the pagan priests who charged and were of no use at all. Imagine the particular exhaustion that builds up when you love someone who suffers in front of you and you can do absolutely nothing. Until one day, in the middle of that bottomless weariness, a rumor reaches her that there's a man, that he crossed the border, that he's nearby, and that wherever he passes, demons come out. It's all she has, a rumor, and it's enough. We don't know her name. The Bible never tells us, and I think that too is part of the message. Matthew calls her, quite intentionally, the Canaanite woman. Mark is even more specific. He says she was Greek and Syrophoenician by birth. That is, in Greek, Hellenis, a Gentile, and Syrophoenician, from the Phoenicia that belonged to Syria. Each word is one more layer of distance. Mark and Matthew want you to feel one by one every reason why this woman had no right to come near. No correct nation, no correct religion, no covenant, no priest. A woman alone in a culture that gave her no voice, pleading for a daughter that a demon was tormenting. And even so, she came. And here the first no begins. Matthew says she arrived crying out. And the word he uses is not gentle. In Greek it's krazo, which means to cry out with force, loudly, with desperate urgency. It's the same word the Gospels use to describe the demon-possessed, the blind at the side of the road, people at the very limit of their desperation. It's not the polite voice of someone asking for an appointment. It's a shout in the middle of the street, repeated, that doesn't stop. And listen to what she shouts. Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is grievously tormented by a demon. Stop on every word of that because it's astonishing. She calls him Lord, and she calls him Son of David. That's no ordinary title. Son of David is a messianic title, deeply Jewish, the name of the promised king who would come to save Israel. It's the most precise theological vocabulary that existed. It is, in fact, the very language Jesus' own disciples were still processing, still debating in low voices among themselves, and it's being used by a pagan woman on pagan soil with a precision her own people were only beginning to accept. That tells you something. This mother didn't arrive by chance. She investigated, she listened to the stories, she found out who this man really was, and she arrived prepared, with the right name on her lips, with the perfect confession. She did everything right. And Jesus' answer was silence. Matthew records it with a bluntness that hurts. He says simply that he answered her not a word, not one. He doesn't say he hesitated. He doesn't say he looked at her. He doesn't say he felt compassion and held it back. He says there was no answer, nothing. Imagine the scene for a moment. And I say imagine because the Bible gives us the facts, but the experience we have to reconstruct. Imagine the midday heat on that coast, the dust of the road, the throat of that woman already raw from so much shouting. Imagine her voice rising and rising, and on the other side, from the side of the only man who could save her daughter, nothing. A wall of silence, as if she didn't exist, as if her pain didn't count. Anyone who has ever truly prayed knows what that feels like. And here's the question I want you to carry through the rest of this story. Why? Why does the Jesus, who on every other page runs toward the one who suffers, here stay mute? Why does the one who touched the leper, who stopped for a woman who barely brushed his cloak, here not open his mouth? Hold on to that question. We're going to come back to it. And the answer is not what you think. Because it turns out this mother was not the first to cry out and find heaven silent. There's a man in the Psalms who cried out the same thing. In Psalm 22, the psalmist says, "My God, I cry out by day, and you do not answer, and by night, and I find no rest." It's the voice of someone who prays and feels there's no one above listening. And the extraordinary thing is whose words these would become centuries later. These are the first words Jesus himself would cry out from the cross. In other words, the silence of heaven is not a sign of abandonment. Even the Son felt it. But that mother, on that road, doesn't yet know it. She only knows that she asked, and that there was no answer. And there's something almost cruel in that kind of waiting. Something only someone who has lived it truly understands. When you ask someone for something and they tell you no, at least you have an answer. It hurts, but you know where you stand, you know your footing. The lack of an answer is different. It leaves you with no ground beneath your feet. You don't know if he didn't hear you, if you don't matter to him, if you're asking wrong, or if you're simply not important enough to deserve a single word. And your mind starts to fill that emptiness. And it almost always fills it with the worst thing you think about yourself. This mother had to stand inside that emptiness. She did everything right. She shouted the correct name. She offered the correct confession. And from the other side came neither a yes nor a no, just the hot midday air. And even so, look carefully at what she did not do. She did not interpret the absence of an answer as a final verdict. She did not decide on her own that the silence meant she was ruled out. She kept treating that silent door not as a door locked forever, but as a door that simply hadn't opened yet. And that difference, that small difference in how you read what is not said, ends up being all the difference in the world. And what does she do with the silence? She doesn't leave, she keeps going. And it's the disciples who can't take it, because that silence is uncomfortable. Notice this detail because it's very human. It wasn't Jesus who complained about her. It was the men who were with him. They came up to him and said, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." Translate it to today, "Get her out of here, she's making noise. She's bothering us, she's following us, and she won't be quiet. Free us from her." These are not evil men. They're tired, just like their master. They were looking for rest, and instead they have a foreign woman shouting behind them in the middle of the street. And their first instinct, the instinct of those who are inside, is to protect the door, to decide who gets in and who doesn't. And this one clearly has to be sent away. And then comes the second no, and this one is worse than the lack of an answer because it's no longer the absence of words. It's words. Jesus says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." I want you to hold on to that line carefully, because we're going to come back to it. And when we do, it's going to be one of the most important sentences in the whole story. But right now, Put yourself for a second in that mother's shoes and feel what that sentence means for her. It's not a no to her request. It's a no to her, to what she is, to her bloodline. It's as if they told her, "The bread I bring is not for your kind. There's a table, and you're not invited to it. You're on the wrong side of the border, and that border wasn't put there by me. It was put there by heaven." How many times has that happened to you? Not that they tell you no to something, but that they make you feel that you are the problem, that you don't qualify, that grace is real, yes, but for others, that the table exists, but not for someone with your history, with your mistakes, with your past. Any reasonable person would have left at that point. They would have lowered their head, felt the shame rise up their face, and turned around. They told you that you don't belong. End of conversation. But this woman does something different. And this is where the story stops being about a rejected person and starts being about the most courageous prayer the scriptures record. Instead of walking away, she comes closer. Instead of retreating from the no, she advances toward it. Matthew says she came and bowed down, knelt directly in front of Jesus, and she reduced everything, absolutely everything, to two words: "Lord, help me." That is probably the most stripped-down prayer in the entire New Testament. There's no theology in it, no credentials, no argument, no resume, no merit. She already tried the perfect title, Son of David, and it didn't work. So she throws everything overboard and keeps the only thing she has left: a mother on her knees in the dust saying, "Help me." And here I stop, because I want you to see something in that gesture. There are moments in life when the elaborate prayers no longer come out, moments when you don't have the strength to quote verses or to build pretty sentences. The only thing that comes out is that, "Help me." And the good news this story is giving you, even though it doesn't look like it yet, is that this two-word prayer, spoken from the ground, is worth more than all the religious speeches in the world. But she doesn't know it yet, because what comes now is the third no, and it's the harshest of all. Stay, because what she answers to this is the most brilliant turn in the entire gospel. And if you still haven't subscribed to the channel, this is the exact moment to do it, because what follows is the most extraordinary masterclass in faith you will ever hear. Here is the sentence in front of which 2,000 years of readers have been left speechless. Jesus looks at her and says, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." Read it again. The Son of God has just compared this desperate mother to a dog. Stay a second in that blow before I explain it to you, because she received it without explanation. In that instant, she had no one beside her to translate the Greek or soften the sentence. She had a holy man in front of a crowd, using the word dog in the same sentence as the image that described her. For a mother who had already swallowed the silence and who had already swallowed the "I was sent only to the sheep of Israel," this was the third wave and the highest one. It was the exact moment when most of us would have exploded or collapsed on the ground or let loose a bitter sentence before turning around to never come back. What she did, instead, is going to challenge everything you believe about how you respond to a humiliation. And here is the first thing you need to understand, the thing the vast majority of people who read this in English completely miss. Because the Greek word Jesus uses is not the word for a wild dog. In the first century, there were two completely different words for dog. The first was kyon, and kyon referred to the stray dogs, scavengers, that roamed the streets of the ancient cities eating garbage. Dangerous animals, dirty, carriers of disease. Nobody wanted them near. And when some Jewish teachers used the word kyon to speak of the Gentiles, it was the cruelest insult the language allowed. It was to dehumanize the other completely. Jesus does not use that word. The word he uses is kunarion, and kunarion is a diminutive. In Greek, just as in English, Diminutives usually carry tenderness, closeness, affection. Kunarion does not mean stray dog. It means little dog, puppy, the pup of the house, the one that lives inside, under the family's care, the one that sleeps beside the children and eats under the table. To feel the weight of that, you have to imagine what a house of that time was really like. There were no high chairs around a formal table like ours. The family ate reclining or sitting on low benches and mats, the dishes within reach, the floor always close. And in many homes on that coast, especially in the Greek world that surrounded this woman, there were small dogs that weren't from the street. They were of the house. They walked among the children's feet, waited patiently beside the food, received what fell. No one drove them off with stones. They were part of the landscape of the home. When Jesus chooses that word, kunarion, he is painting exactly that picture. Not the mangy animal that flees through the alley, but the puppy resting under the family table. So, hidden beneath what sounds like a door slamming, there's a tender image waiting for someone to discover it. An image of belonging, not of contempt. And this woman, who knew that scene as well as anyone, because she came from exactly that culture, saw it instantly. And this is not an unimportant grammatical detail. It's the key that unlocks the whole conversation. Because look at what Jesus has just done, almost without it being noticed. He's not comparing her to a dangerous, sick animal of the street. He's placing her inside the house, under the table, yes. Not yet eating from the plate, yes, but inside, in the home, present at the family meal. There's an invitation hidden inside the namadu. There's a door left ajar inside what sounds like a slamming door. The question is whether she's going to see it. And here, this nameless mother, with no education, with no tool but the desperation of her heart, does something so sharp that the most brilliant minds of every century since have stopped to admire it. She doesn't flinch, she doesn't fall down crying, she doesn't turn around humiliated. She takes the exact image Jesus put in front of her, that image of the house, the table, the children and the little dogs, and she uses it. She turns it. She converts it into her own weapon, and she answers, "Yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." I want to show you slowly the genius of what just happened, because it's one of the great moments in all of ancient literature, and almost no one stops to see it up close. She begins by saying yes, in Greek, nai. She doesn't argue with the metaphor. She doesn't claim rights. She doesn't demand a place at the table. She doesn't tell Jesus he's wrong, or that he's unfair, or that she deserves more. She accepts each and every one of the terms. Yes, there's a table. Yes, the children eat first. Yes, I am the little dog. Agreed. All conceded. And then she finds the one thing the metaphor hadn't taken into account. If the little dogs are under the table, they're not outside the house, they're inside. And in any house in the world, while the children eat, crumbs fall. Not because someone hands them out on purpose, not because anything has to be taken from the children, but because that's how meals work. There's abundance, there are pieces that fall, and those pieces, naturally, reach the floor where the little dogs are. And notice the word she chooses for crumbs, because here is the finest detail of the whole exchange, the one almost no one notices. In Greek, it's kyon, and kyon is also a diminutive. It's the tiny crumb, the smallest piece that exists, what's left of what's left over. Do you realize what she did? Jesus spoke to her with a diminutive kunarion, the little dog, and she answers him with another diminutive kyon, the tiny crumb. She follows his lead on his own ground. She tells him in essence, "You're right, I'm only the little dog of the house. Well then, give me only the tiny crumb. I'm not asking you for the children's bread. I'm not asking you to leave the table. I'm not asking you to interrupt your mission with Israel for even a moment. I'm only asking for what falls on its own, while you're seated feeding your own." She has taken the very argument that seemed to leave her outside and turned it into the perfect reason why she should be included. She doesn't ask Jesus to deprive Israel of anything. She asks for what overflows from the abundance. She tells him, "Your table is so rich that even what falls to the floor is enough to save my daughter." It's brilliant, it's humble and fierce at the same time. It's faith and intelligence braided into a single sentence. And it is, without question, one of the most perfect answers any human being ever gave to God. And now comes the moment that changes everything. Because Jesus doesn't try to recover ground. He doesn't qualify it. He doesn't correct it. He concedes completely. He looks at her and says, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed from that hour. Stop here, because there are 3 things in this single line, and each one deserves for you to see it. The first, that phrase, "Great is your faith," is one of the rarest compliments in the entire Gospel of Matthew. Jesus doesn't hand it out lightly. If you go through the whole Gospel of Matthew from beginning to end, that exact expression, in Greek megale pistis, great faith, appears only twice in the whole book. One is here with this Canaanite mother, and the other is in chapter 8, when a Roman centurion, another foreigner, another Gentile with no covenant and no right of any kind, comes to Jesus and tells him that he's not worthy for him to enter his house, that it's enough for him to say the word. And the master is amazed and says that he has not found such great faith, not even in Israel. Do you see it? The only 2 people to whom Jesus acknowledges a great faith in the entire Gospel of Matthew are not Jews. They're not the experts in the law. They're not the ones who have the temple, nor the covenant, nor the credentials. They are 2 outsiders, a Roman soldier and a pagan mother. Matthew is building something with that, quietly beneath the story, and this nameless woman is one of the 2 pillars that hold it up. The second thing, look at how Jesus addresses her. He calls her woman, and in Greek, in his mouth, that word is not cold or contemptuous. It's the same respectful term he uses to address his own mother from the cross. It's not the tone of someone who really wanted to get rid of her. It's warm. Hold on to that, because when we come back to the great question of this story, that small detail is going to matter. And the third, look at when the miracle happens. From that hour, in Greek, apotes horas ekenis, not gradually, not over time, not the next day, in the exact instant that her argument was honored. And here is the detail that breaks the heart, the one almost no commentary stops on. Her daughter wasn't there. Think about it. This mother isn't standing in front of Jesus holding her sick child. She has no one to show. She can't present the suffering as evidence. She's fighting for someone who isn't in the room, for someone who doesn't even know this battle is being waged. She's asking for a miracle at a distance, for a person she can't see, based on nothing more than her own word and her own faith. And Mark gives us the ending that Matthew doesn't tell. In his chapter 7, he says Jesus told her, "For this saying, go your way, the demon has gone out of your daughter." For this saying. Notice, not for your suffering, not for your tears, for this saying, for this argument, for this faith, go. And then imagine the journey home. Imagine that mother walking the road back to her house, still with the dust of the road on her feet, still without having seen anything with her own eyes, holding on only to a promise. Imagine the door of her house opening, and inside, her daughter, lying down, quiet, at peace, the torment gone. That is exactly what Mark says she found. The child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. 2 people united by love, one fighting in the only place where she could fight, the other receiving without knowing it what was being won for her. And between the road and the house, across all the distance that separated them, in the same instant, the deliverance. If you've ever prayed for someone who doesn't even know you're doing it, for a child, for a parent, for someone who has already stopped believing, this story is telling you something. It's telling you that that prayer, made from far away, for someone who can't ask for themselves, arrives. It crosses the distance, that is, in its purest form, intercession. One person pushing toward the mercy of God on behalf of another who can't push alone. Now, I have to be honest with you, because this channel is not going to hide the hard questions from you. There's a question that has divided scholars and believers for centuries in front of this story. And it's this: was Jesus testing her? That is, was this whole exchange, the silence, the second no, the little dogs, a deliberate test, a kind of exam to make visible a faith he already knew she had? Or was something stranger going on, something more uncomfortable? There are those who say yes, that it was all a test, and that the real audience was the disciples. Remember that they wanted her sent away. They saw a foreign woman, loud, with no religious credentials, and their first impulse was to get her out of the way. According to this reading, Jesus let the scene unfold not so much for her, but to show his own followers what they were about to miss. So they would see that the greatest faith of the day was in the person they wanted to send away. And in favor of this is precisely that detail we already talked about, the warm tone with which he calls her woman, the same one he would use with his mother. That's not the tone of someone who really rejects her, and there are those who read something deeper and more mysterious. This story touches the heart of one of the great mysteries of the faith, that he was fully God, and at the same time fully human. Luke, in his chapter 2, says that Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature. Grew. And this encounter, in that reading, would be one of those moments when God's eternal plan and the real humanity of the Nazarene touch, and a Canaanite mother, with the force of her faith, becomes not a student in a lesson, but a participant in something that was being revealed. I'm not going to give you a closed answer because the Bible doesn't give one, and I'm not going to invent what the text doesn't say. Both readings have serious and devout people behind them. But I want you to see one thing, and this one the text does say with complete clarity. Whatever the answer is to why Jesus acted this way, what the woman did doesn't change. In the face of the silence, in the face of the border, in the face of the harshest word, she kept going. And the question that really matters is not what Jesus was thinking. It's what you are going to do the next time heaven stays silent. Because now comes the part almost no one sees when they read this story in isolation. And it's that this story is not isolated. Matthew placed it in a very specific spot in his gospel, and he did it on purpose. Look at the sequence he arranges, and you're going to see the plan. Shortly before this encounter in chapter 14, Jesus does something enormous. He feeds a crowd of 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Where? In Jewish territory, among his own, inside the covenant. After that comes the argument about the clean and the unclean. After that, the master crosses the border into pagan land. After that, this encounter with the Canaanite mother, where a Gentile receives the crumbs of that bread. And what happens immediately afterward? Matthew tells it at the end of the same chapter 15. The Messiah returns near the Sea of Galilee, but on the side of the nations goes up a mountain, and great crowds come to him with the lame, the blind, the mute, and the sick, and he heals them all. And the people, Matthew says, glorified the God of Israel. Stop on that phrase. They glorified the God of Israel. If that crowd were Jewish, it would make no sense to say it that way, as if it were a discovery. You don't glorify the God of Israel as something new if he's already been your God your whole life. That's the language of people who are finding something for the first time, and then Jesus feeds them too, them, the outsiders, with 7 loaves and a few fish. 4,000 people. Do you see it? The same gesture. First the bread for Israel, then the bread for the nations. First the children at the table, then the whole house. And between those 2 meals, at the exact center, stands this mother. Her argument about the crumbs didn't just win the healing of her daughter, it opened the door. She was the first of a multitude. Someone had to demonstrate with her own voice that someone from outside could recognize the Messiah, win an argument with his own metaphor, and receive not the leftovers of contempt, but the bread of salvation. And that person was a woman to whom the scriptures don't even give a name. Think about the magnitude of that for a moment. If you weren't born in Israel, if you come from any other nation on earth, and you've ever heard in your life that the love of God is also for you, that certainty had to begin somewhere concrete in history. There had to be a first time when someone from outside came near, insisted, and was not entirely rejected. And one of those first times, one of the ones that opened the crack through which the whole world would later enter, was this one. A pagan mother, with no correct nation and no covenant, who simply did not accept staying on the outside of the door. We owe far, far more than we imagine to her holy stubbornness. That's why I told you at the beginning that her sentence opened the door to the whole world. It wasn't an exaggeration. The border between those inside and those outside, the border that separated Israel from the nations, began to fall here, on this dusty road, with a mother on her knees who would not take no for an answer. And this is where this story stops talking about her and starts talking about you. Because there's something this mother understood in the middle of the silence and the no's that completely changes the way you pray. And it's not what many people believe. The lesson is not that if you insist enough, you end up twisting God's arm. It's not that prayer is a contest of endurance and that heaven gives in when it sees you stubborn enough. That would turn God into an annoyed judge who answers only so you'll leave him alone. The lesson is another, and it's much deeper. It's that behind every apparent no, this woman kept believing that there was a goodness. That even though the door sounded closed, on the other side there was a heart that was not her enemy. That the silence didn't mean contempt, and that the border didn't mean abandonment. She didn't fight against God. She fought clinging to a conviction about who God is, even when everything on the surface seemed to say the opposite. There was another who did something similar long before her. In the book of Genesis, in chapter 32, there's a man named Jacob who wrestles all night against a mystery he doesn't understand. And at dawn, exhausted, wounded, he holds on and says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me. I will not let you go." That's the same fiber as this mother. It's not the faith of someone who has everything figured out. It's the faith of someone who doesn't let go, even in the dark, even without answers, because deep down they believe that on the other side there is blessing and not rejection. And there's something more, something that lights up this whole scene from the future. Sometime later, the same master who let this mother cry out without an answer would tell his disciples another story. And Luke, in his chapter 18, tells us exactly why he told it. So that they would always pray and not lose heart. So that they would never give up. It was the story of a widow, another woman with no power, no influence, no one in the world to defend her, who went again and again before an unjust judge to ask that justice be done for her. The judge ignored her. He ignored her just as the world ignored this Canaanite woman. And yet the widow didn't tire. She came back and came back and came back. And in the end, the judge gave in, not because he was good, but because she quite simply did not stop coming. And the master closes that parable with a question that seems written for this story. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Do you realize what that means? The Canaanite mother wasn't breaking any rule of heaven by insisting. She was living ahead of time, exactly the kind of faith that Jesus would later ask of everyone. The faith that doesn't let go, the one that keeps knocking on the door even though it seems no one on the other side is moving. She wasn't the stubborn one who pestered until she got her way. She was the first to show, with her own body in the dust, what her master would later define as the very heart of prayer. And I want you to think now about where you are in this story. Not as a nice device to end the video, but for real. Because there are several places in this scene, and almost all of us pass through all of them at different moments of life. There's the place of the Pharisees, that logic that runs through the whole story even though they're no longer in the scene. The ones who have built their faith around knowing who's inside and who's outside. For whom what matters is keeping the borders correct, the credentials in order, the access well guarded. There's the place of the disciples, and their failure is quiet and human and recognizable. They're not cruel, they're tired, they're managing, organizing, trying to protect something, and in protecting it, they almost missed the most extraordinary moment they were going to witness. How many times, without realizing it, have you been the disciple? How many times have you decided on the inside who deserves grace and who doesn't? How many times has it bothered you to see goodness poured out on someone who, by your count, didn't deserve it? And there's a fourth place in this scene, the most uncomfortable of all, because it's the one almost no one dares to admit. It's the place of the one who already got tired, the one who prayed for years for something and saw nothing, and one day, without telling anyone, stopped praying, not out of rebellion, out of exhaustion, because it hurt too much to keep asking a heaven that seemed not to answer. If that's you, this woman doesn't have a single reproach for you, only her silent example, because she also had every reason to close her mouth and walk away. And she chose, instead, to take one more step toward the door. Not a heroic step, with her head held high. A step on her knees, in the dust, with two words trembling on her lips. Sometimes faith is not a shout of victory. Sometimes it's just refusing to leave. And there's the place of her, the woman who had every reason in the world to leave. They ignored her. They compared her to a dog. They made her feel she was beyond the reach of everything that was being offered. She had a sick daughter at home for whom no one else was fighting. And she stood in the rubble of every apparent rejection, and inside the very metaphor that seemed to leave her outside, she found a reason to stay. The crumbs. Even the little dogs eat the crumbs. She didn't ask for the whole table. She asked for what falls, and what she received was her daughter, healed and whole from that very hour. Maybe you too have felt like that mother. Maybe you've cried out, and heaven has been silent for so long that you've almost stopped crying out. Maybe someone at some point made you believe that your story is too complicated, that your mistakes are too many, that the bread is real, but not for someone like you. If this video reached you on one of those days, leave me something in the comments. A single word is enough. Write down below who you're praying for today, for that daughter, that son, that marriage, that health, that person who doesn't even know you're fighting for them, just the name or a word, so that you don't carry it in silence. Because this is what the story of this nameless woman is telling you, and I want you to hear it well before you go on with your day. God doesn't measure your worth by your origin, nor by your past, nor by your position. This mother had no nation, no temple, no priest, no covenant. She had absolutely nothing to present, except a real need and a conviction that the love of God was greater than all the borders others had placed on top of her. And it turns out she was right. And notice something that's very easy to overlook. She didn't receive less for having asked only for the crumbs. She received her daughter whole, complete, entirely free. The humility of her request didn't shrink the miracle one bit. She came asking for the smallest thing that exists, what falls to the floor, what's left over, what no one misses. And what came back to her house was the greatest thing that woman could receive in all her life. That's the kind of table we're talking about. So abundant, so overflowing, that its crumbs are enough to heal what no pagan priest and no remedy of the coast could even touch. So the question in the end, is not whether God has grace for you. That question already has an answer. The real question, the one only you can answer, is whether you're going to believe that you're worthy of receiving it, and whether you're going to keep standing in front of that door, even when it sounds closed. Because this rejected woman, foreign, with not a single recognized right, heard no 3 times. And the 4th thing she heard was, "Great is your faith." The video appearing on your screen right now is going to show you another story that very few dare to tell in full. I'm not going to tell you which one. I'll only tell you that, if this moves something inside you, what's coming there is going to move it even more. Click, and let's keep going.